Um, all right, so welcome everyone to the 53rd episode of the SFU Sports Analytics Virtual Seminar Series. Today we have Dr. Jack Davis from the University of Waterloo to speak to us about hockey goaltending analytics. So Michael John, or Jack Davis, is an assistant professor in the teaching stream in the Statistics and Actuarial Science at department at the University of Waterloo. They helped found the University of Waterloo Analysis Group for Games and Sports, otherwise known as UAGS. And with UEGs, they develop and present tutorials on finding, analyzing, and visualizing data for hockey, soccer, lacrosse, horse racing, and esports. Dr. Davis obtained their PhD in statistics and actuarial science at Simon Fraser University several years ago, followed by working for Sportlogique as a machine learning postdoctoral fellow, focusing mainly on NHL ice hockey. They have also worked for Big River Analytics as a survey designer and statistical consultant and analyzed networks of disease transmission and networks of citations between Supreme Court of Canada decisions. Of note, Dr. Davis is authoring a book on sports analytics, so be on the lookout for it in the coming months. Okay, and just in terms of the topics today, uh, I'm a former goaltender myself, and my son's a goalie. And I think that goaltending and goalkeeping are relatively underserved in the sports analytics in general. So I'm very excited today because Dr. Davis will help address this gap in the sport of ice hockey, where he'll discuss progress in goaltending analytics as it pertains to monitoring goalie fatigue and its effect on performance, what happens after the puck is stopped, and predicting the starting goalie in the NHL. And with that, I will stop sharing and hand it over to you, Jack, and look forward to your talk.
Okay, okay. So, oh, it's already set to record. So I'll just set share entire window here. All right. Okay, so going to talk about a just sort of a slate of small topics today, all related to goalie metrics. A lot of this is based on the work that I did either as like a near the end of my PhD at Simon Fraser or at Sportlogique, um, a few years after. So it's all old now, so I can talk about it. So topics. So I wanted to spice this up a little bit. Um, so we're talking goalie fatigue first, and just to sort of spoil it a little bit, goalies don't fatigue. So today's topics, goalies are proof that humans are terrifying, indefatigable persistence hunters. If you don't know what a persistence hunter is, that is something that just follows another creature until it falls over and dies from exhaustion, which is um, how early humans tended to do things. So I did a lot of this in 2016, not persistence hunting, but looking at goalies. Um, and I recently I double checked. Nothing has changed in 10 years. So skate for your lives. Then we're going to look at stuff like counter passes and offensive rebounds. So the idea that Martin Brodeur was particularly good at this. So not only could he stop the puck, he could make you feel silly for even trying. And which of these guys are starting tonight? So which of these slinky spine cyborgs are we facing tonight? So let's look at how things looked in 2016. So first, do goalies fatigue? Specifically, does their performance worsen as their workload accumulates? So this comes from a question that Rob Volman posed in his goaltending Q&A in 2014 in the Hockey Abstract. He had a subchapter on how are goalies affected by workload? And the answer he came up with is they're either better or the same in games where they suffer a greater workload. The issue with this analysis is that it was done at a game by game level. So looking at, oh, this goalie faced 45 shots and they let four in, and this goalie faced 90 shots and they let nine in, which is basically the same performance. 90 is, of course, an extremely high number. So I wanted to look at it shot by shot. How well does the goalie face their first shot? How well do they face their 30th shot? And so on. So originally I did this with play-by-play data from NHL Scraper, which doesn't exist anymore. It's not on CRAN anymore. It's been replaced by Hockey R by Daniel Morse, which does the same thing, but it's up to date. And taking this, we aggregate the shots, estimating save percentage, starting goalies against their ith shot of the game. So, of in this particular thing, I looked at 7,822 game sides, so number of games times two. And of those that had a 10th shot, which is all of them, um, 694 scored. So we could say the save percentage against that particular, against the 10th shot is about 91%. We can also model stuff like log odds. We could do a logistic regression on this. And this is what I found back then. Does this zoom out at all? No? Okay. Um, so I fit like a polynomial curve to it. We can argue about how well or poor that's fitting. But I've built upon this since then. And the first couple shots always seem to be pretty ineffective. But after that, so after about 10, 20, 30, it's pretty stable. It gets really unstable at the end here, but that's because we've got a small sample size. There isn't a whole lot of games in which a goalie faces their 50th shot. And those that do, remember, we're zoomed in here for the save percentage of at the bottom 88 and the top 96%. Now, other than this initial point here, which seems to be players getting into a groove, like skaters getting into a groove, it just doesn't change. So, okay, maybe it's not shots. Maybe we should be looking at shot attempts. So this is save percentage based on, is it the first shot attempt received? Is it the 20th shot attempt received? And so on. Um, So, yeah, each of these later shots is 20 to 30% worse, so that you get like a 9% shooting percentage instead of that initial one of 6.5 to 7. But once that rhythm is reached, there's really no additional decline. And this is, if anything, more stable than the other ones. So, facing your 60th shot attempt, goalies tend to be just as good as facing their 10th to 20th. Okay, so let's see how much of a shot attempt we're actually looking at here. Um, so in this particular case, you can see that the starting goalie, before they are replaced, and they're not always replaced. Oh, there we go. They're not always replaced. They're not often replaced, only about 15% of the time. Um, you can see that facing 40 shots is pretty rare. Another thing we can do is we can look at different goalies. So if I take the 123 goalies that faced 400 shots in this range, which was like 2016, 17, 18, 19. No, sorry, 13, 14, 15, 16. Um, we can build three different curves based on fitting a curve only to the top one third of the goalies. So their save percentage is universally higher. And the trend seems to be about the same. And after 35 or 40, it gets quite random at the end. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. That's what that gray line is. It's the unsmooth values. And if anything, it improves as the game progresses after that initial spark or initial drop. Also tried to take a look at relieving goalies. So there's a couple arguments against replacing a goalie, which is originally where I was going with this when I started doing this, is I was wondering what would happen if we had something like a starting goalie and a relieving goalie, the same way we have a starting pitcher and a relieving pitcher in baseball. And there's a lot of arguments against that, that um, the starting goalie need or the goalie needs practice. They need to warm up, and you can't really warm up a relieving goalie. There, it would be a delay of game. So, looking at the relieving goalies, there isn't a whole lot of data here to work with, but what we see is a possible decline, but again, it's like very small amounts of data. Now, this analysis, it leaves a lot to be desired. It leaves a lot of work left to be done. Um, for starts, it doesn't consider any sort of period effect. The second period is consistently a higher scoring one than the first or the third. And that's mostly attributed to the fact that the benches are not defensively placed. So the the direction in which players skate offensively swaps from first to second and second to third period, but the benches, the location of the benches does not change. So in the first and third periods, teams are closer to their own net, and in the second period they're further from their own net. So that might attribute to that dip in the middle that we saw. It also doesn't factor other sources of workload that aren't shots or even shot attempts, so face-offs and zone entries. During these times when players are passing around to each other, the goalie still has to stay alert. Um, and yeah, so we could think about like offensive zone time as well. It also treats every shot or shot attempt as an equal amount of work. And it's that last one that I want to address now. So high quality shots might be considered more work to manage than low quality shots. Um, so what we're going to do now is instead of looking at each shot as a unit of work, let's take the unit of work as expected goals. So let's build a boilerplate, just like a off-the-shelf expected goals model. Nothing really fancy here. And it doesn't have to be particularly fancy because I'm not interested in the variation from a single shot. I'm interested in the variation from a cumulative of many shots or shot attempts. So built a log odds goal model here. So we've got shot distance in feet, shots that are closer to the net score more often. That is the primary factor for shot distance or for goal percentage. SA shot angle in degrees, so more direct shots tend to work a little better than shots at an angle. And you can imagine that the surface area from the shooter's perspective or from the puck's perspective is larger if you're not shooting at an angle. So that makes sense. Um, ST here, the third term, is shot attempt type. Now, I've poured a lot into this. I've got the different types of shots that we can get from hockey are. So backhand, but just batting it out of the air. Between the legs, this is pretty rare. Cradle, deflected, poke, slap shot, snap shot, tip-ins, wraparounds, and wrist shots. Now, there's a couple others that don't seem like they belong here, and they normally don't in a log odds model. So um, missed shot and blocked shot. You might think, so why would we bother having those there? A blocked shot has a 0% chance of going in unless it bounces off a defender. So in any case, it has a much, much lower chance, not usually considered. And a missed shot, by definition, it didn't even get to the net. So the goalie didn't have to do anything, but it'd still work. Um, and that's the point here is missed and block shots. They're included as shot types, but um, we know that these shot attempts have zero chance of being, and we know they have zero chance of being goals, but I'm not interested in using this XG model as a measure of like predicting which goals go in. I'm using it as a measure to see how much work the goalie had to do to prevent that. And they're still working to prevent it, even if it gets blocked. A couple others, just because we had them available and it could matter for tactical situations. So if the attacking team has pulled their goalie, that means there's an extra attacker. And player strength. So this has been put into three categories: even strength, power play, and shorthanded. Two men down or two men up doesn't uh, just gets folded into shorthanded and power play, respectively. So this basic XG model, this allows us to build another set of models. using this cumulative amount of basic XG faced by a goalie as that explanatory variable. So this is a fatigue informed XG. And if there is a fatigue effect, we should see this as a positive coefficient for beta XG. That's this new one here. And similarly, we would expect to see a positive coefficient for beta face-off. That's this one here. So is this one greater than zero? And is this one greater than zero? So let's consider those possibilities. So building a model for that, I'm not going to go through, there's like a whole bunch of coefficients here that I am dropping. I'm not dropping, they're not being reported on here. Um, and this is our same model as we had before, but now I've included XG faced. And for every additional goal faced, and you think about the scale of that, that scale goes from basically 0 to 5. 5 being the extreme situation. So in a typical end of goal situation, or end of game situation, we're talking like 3, 3.5. Um, the log odds of a goal in that case is 0.03. So what is the odds of that then? That's like 3% more. It's basically nothing. And we fail to detect any effect here. Likewise with face-offs faced, it's a similar story. Okay, so maybe the issue is that it's conditioning on things that already have to do with like the quality of the shot. So maybe what's happening is there's a confounding effect. Maybe there's something going on where shots get better um, as the game progresses. So maybe let's simplify this model and see if we can find anything. So in this case, let's only look at shot distance and shot angle. Um, so we've removed stuff like extra attacker, which does happen more often at the end of the game. Um, and here we actually get something. So you can see from beginning to end of game, that's like a log odds difference of like 0.12 or 0.14 for 3.5 goals. And that's still not a tremendous difference. It barely detects anything there. And face-offs doesn't really seem to be mattering much. So still not definitive. Let's try one more model. And this one is just an outright abuse. This is just the closest analog to the model we have in the 2016 version. So it's just looking at expected goals faced plus expected goals faced squared plus expected goals faced cubed. So basically fitting a cubic polynomial to this. And because there's nothing else here, we find that it is still better than the null model, but I wouldn't say that that's definitive of anything because we really want is to say that like the performance is getting worse over and above, or yeah, the performance is deteriorating over and above stuff like shot quality, whereas here we've ignored shot quality completely. If we try to take a density plot of this, we do, of course, get that what looks like the wispy tail of a cubic model. This one I think is more telling. So this is an analogy to yeah, this is in analogy to um the one where we had like shots faced over time. So this is goals per shot attempt. This time I'm only looking at a single season because I've used the data better, honestly. Um, and we see the same idea here that we get like a trending upwards for the first 10 shots or the first one goal faced, and then nothing. Then it's just constantly about 5% of a goal for each shot attempt. And roughly half of shot attempts become shots. So this is roughly 10%. We can also have a look at sample size here, just to give you a sense of this. And this is pretty, I would say, a pretty robust sample size, at least for the first three goals faced, where we've got 2,000 shot attempts. In each case, it's larger than what we had before because now we're looking at shot attempts instead of shots. Um, and I think in total we have about 170,000 of those shot attempts in one season. Okay, so in conclusion, goalies do not tire. Um, they just they don't seem to. If they do, that's not affecting their performance. They are the persistent hunters of the sporting world. Let's look at a couple other ways that goalies can succeed or fail. So let's consider rebounding. So we're used to seeing what goalies do in terms of just these two outcomes. Did the puck go in the net or not? Every save is a victory, every goal is a defeat. Um, I think that's a little simplistic because there are things goalies can do. They can prevent additional shots once a shot has been taken. So basically, to punish an offensive team from taking shots. So imagine, as an extreme example, that every time you take a shot, you lose possession. You're going to be a lot more careful with your shots, and therefore, um, you're probably going to score fewer goals. On the opposite end, if 90% of the time you shoot, you are able to retain possession by it bouncing it off of the goalie and taking like a second shot, um, you're probably going to be a lot more trigger happy with your shots. So we're going to consider two particular cases, mitigation and counter passes. First, we're going to count offensive rebounds, any rebound that keeps the possession in the offensive. So if there's multiple shots for the offense, that's for any given possession, that's what happened. Um, and apart from either rebound is a counter pass, which is where the goalie definitively gains control of the puck and passes it to a teammate. Now, this part I cannot recreate because I don't have the data anymore of the fidelity necessary for this. So this was stuff like loose puck recovery data from Sportlogic. So we've got our five outcomes here. Um, so we're going to consider about 3,000 games, so half of the 2019-2020 season and all of 17-18 and 18-19. Um, so home versus away, more shots on net per game, more shot attempts per game, by a little bit, number of goals, and stuff like goals per shot. Okay, but let's break this down. So, of those 52% of shots that actually become shots on net, 9.15% of them score, but the others are not goals. So, the Sportlogic data has things like loose puck recovery, it has passes, it has zone entries. We can get some zone entries from all three zones these days, but the other ones, not so much. Um, so, best to worst outcomes other than goal, right? So, if what is the best save versus the worst save? The best save would be a counter pass. The goalie immediately takes control of the puck, passes it to a teammate in a controlled way. There's stoppages where the goalie covers the puck and otherwise creates a stoppage in play. That's not as good because even though it stops the assault, what it doesn't do is definitively give control of the puck to your teammate, to the defensive teammate. We can rebound to the defense, so the goalie never actually controls the puck, but deflects it in such a way that offensive possession ends. And then the goalie never controls the puck and it's deflected back into offensive possession, which opens up another shot, typically. So if we look at each of these, so we take our 31.6 shots on net, or for the home team, or 64 in total. Um, we can see 5% of these end up as counter passes, 28% as stoppages, and rebounds about a 50-50 split either way. Oh, that's unfortunate. Can I zoom in on that? No. Okay. It didn't work for either of them. Okay, so what's happening here is the probability of rebounds the further away a shot is, the less likely it is to become a rebound. So, in other words, the goalie has a better chance of controlling the puck the further it goes. And offensive rebounds and defensive rebounds end up about the same, or in the same proportion all the way through. And we can see this also in terms of like proportion of all the different shots. So this is proportion of uh things that are rebounds, and this is also like rebounds per shot. This is per shot attempt, sorry, and this is per shot. So more and more things end up becoming blocked shots or missed shots further away. But if we filter those out, then um, then we see that like rebounds of the things that actually reach the goalie, rebounds are about equally effective all the way through. Okay, one last topic. Let's start. Let's talk about predicting a starting goalie. So this is going back to that idea of like baseball analogies. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought I had closed that out. Quit Teams. There we go. Um, so we have like a rotation. We have the concept of a rotation with pitchers, so that if in game one of the season we know who a pitcher is, we also have a pretty good idea of who the pitcher will be for game 6 and game 11 and game 16 and game 21. If it's a 5 pitcher rotation, which is pretty standard. Um, and although there's some randomness to that and additional strategic consideration, who's injured, who's on like a plus or who's on a tear, who are you facing? The rotation is predictable enough that sports media frequently will report probable starters 2 or 3 games in advance. In NHL hockey, that doesn't seem to be the case. And that's despite the fact that we don't have a rotation of 5 goalies. We have 2 goalies typically. Um, yeah. And having more accurate prediction, that's valuable to the media. It's something to spin a narrative out of. It's useful for sports gambling. It's just it's a fun thing to know. Um, and like it matters too, right? So that the average difference between a main goalie and a secondary goalie amounts to a third of a goal. That's that's comparable to the home team advantage. Um, in terms of like goals, yeah, goals faced or goals scored, goal differential. Um, so it's basically, do you get to double up your home team advantage or not? Um, I forget what the p-value is here, unfortunately. Um, but what we're seeing is a trend here that the main goalie shows up about just between 3/5 and 2/3 of the time. So, despite the evidence that we've got some season to season drift over that, um, there's there's not much in terms of like a model there. So, um, if we have like detailed scheduling information for this, or rather, what we have is like we have detailed scheduling information in the past. We have like number of days until someone has played or since they have played and so on. So what we can do is we can build a model for this. So same idea as with the goal scoring, we're going to look at a legit model. We're going to look at yeah, a logistic model. And the binary responses was the main goalie used. We're not going to, so if for whatever reason a team has 3 goalies, we're lumping together the second and third one together. Um, and what we're going to do here is instead of showing you the model, which again is just like 25 coefficients, let's break it down. So um, over the last 3 seasons, in this case, that's 2017-18 to 19-20, in a vacuum, the home team puts their main goalie out more often than the visiting team does. So 65% versus 57. That's statistically significant. Um, and it's practically significant too. That's nothing to sniff at. Um, so yeah, accounting for everything else. So this is like in our model, not just so this is like just on the marginal. This is conditional. Conditionally, it's 1.06 times as high when they're at home. So that means it's persistent even after we factor in things like scheduling or like recent performance, which we're also going to talk about in a little bit here. Long-term usage matters. It's not as overwhelmingly large as it seems. So the log odds ratio is 4.669 for never being used and always being used, but that that model is not really a fair comparison. So the proportion of times that a team uses their main goalie is rarely outside the 50% to 80% mark. I mean, if it's 50%, that means you've got two main goalies basically. Um, so what that means is a goalie that tends to start 80% of the time historically, they're four times as likely, all else being equal. So that is again like managing recent performance, managing other things. Um, Likely to be still the main goalie. And you might think, why isn't it like, well, relative risk 1.6, which is not the same thing as log odds offhand, but that's because this is conditional, not marginal. So yeah, the more a team has used their main goalie this season, the more likely they are to keep using them. Um, and that's really all there is to it. So that might suggest that the main goalie is better by a wider margin than the backup, or more experienced, or is healthier, or in a hot streak. So there's a lot of different reasons why this could be. Days of rest matters too. Um, so if a team, just the individual, if a team has had 3 days of rest, they're less likely to start with their main goalie than if the team has had 2 days of rest instead of has had 2 days of rest. Um, they're equally likely to start their, or sorry, if they've had 2 days of rest, they're equally likely to start compared to having just a single day of rest. Um, and also the days of rest that a team is expecting, because they know their schedule in advance too. Um, so if they know that they're going to have a break coming up, then they're more likely to use their main goalie now. Probably, I mean, well, you could speculate that it has something to do with that, like load management, which is what I'm guessing here. Um, but yeah, since teams never play 3 games in 3 consecutive nights, I don't think, um, at least one of the current rest and expected rest effects are going to come into play at least once here. Um, and there's also a back-to-back game effect. If a game happened the previous night and the main goalie started, um, the log odds are way lower. So what happens is you typically don't start the main goalie 2 nights in a row. What happens is instead you would either go main goalie and then backup, or backup and then main. Time of year matters. Um, and why I find this one particularly interesting is the thing about time of year is that means games are more meaningful for some teams and less meaningful for other teams, because they've either been eliminated from the playoffs if it's late in the season, or they've clinched a playoffs. That would make it less likely, and then they know with more certainty if they're on the bubble or not. Um, but also, like, the main goalie's less likely to start, which is all else being equal, which is maybe kind of surprising, but Maybe it's because they get worn out more, or maybe it's because the backup has proven themselves more. There's lots of other possibilities there. Recent performance matters, and this one is probably, um, uh, yeah, probably a little bit. So, where am I going with this? Um, the better the basically the better you do last game, the more likely you are to show up in your existing game. So how effective is this? So this is a predictive probability of the main goalie. So instead of just having a blanket probability um, at about 60%, we actually start to get some spread out from that. Um, I I think I actually failed to mention here, but this model that I have does predict the main goalie or who the main goalie is about 72% of the time. So it's better than null, but it's not um, it's still not great. Um, so for days of rest of individual goalies as well, we also have um, we have a few other things here. So basically, if the main goalie has had a few days of rest, they're more likely to show up. But if they have a lot of rest, that typically means they're injured. So um, the or something's not great with them. So it starts to drop off after a while. Okay, so just a few other things to consider. Um, so some other things I've got for this. So pulling the goalie. Uh, It's been useful to consider. Hockey Abstract, NHL Scrape R, and Hockey R. Okay, so I'm ready to answer questions.
Great. Thanks, Jack, for the
Sure.
talk.
Mhm.
Learned lots about goalies. Okay, so we'll take questions from the audience. So let me open up the gallery here. Okay, so if
Mhm.
you can just please turn on your video and unmute and ask your question, that would be great. I guess I'll start. So, did you say, I got just a quick clarification question. So, you said this when you were talking about fatigue that goalies get
Mhm.
replaced not often, and I think you said 15%. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like in 15% of games, that's what I found.
Oh,
But
in games. Okay. Not
yeah,
15% at sort of the time for a single goal. That'd be like 1 in 10 outings, I guess. Like a
yeah, 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 yeah.
little bit
More
more.
like 1 in 30 outings
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
Sorry, no, sorry, 1 in 27.5%. Yeah, okay, so 1 in 15 to 20 outings. Yeah. Um, I'll have to check that.
Okay. No
Yeah.
big deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
the 15% seemed a bit high, but depends
Yeah.
obviously on what specifically you're talking about. And then the
Yeah.
data source for your fatigue models was when you're talking about expected goals, that would have been sport logic
No.
tracking data. No.
Um, no. The fatigue models is just using event data. So that is recreatable. Um, yeah, so that is in fact something that I recreated this
How
week.
do you get like shot distance and angle from just event data? Is that coded then by from
That
video
is
originally?
that is indeed coded. So I don't know if it's from, I assume it's from video because they've got more tracking information. But yeah, it's scraped from NHL.com using the Hockey R package. Um, I can go over to Sports Dataverse here and Sports Dataverse, and I can show you. If I go over to packages, there's highly recommend this website for this. Hoop R, Chess R. No, there is. There it is, Hockey R. Um, with this, you can just grab the play-by-play with a single like a single line of code. You can grab everything. So about 500,000 events across all, or six, 700,000 events across the entire season. And it's got 131 variables. I think I have it available right here. So yeah, I can show you if I just make that larger. So if I go like head, let's go data frame all goalies because that's what I'm using right now. Um, this is what's available. So event type, shot on goal, backhand, who the team was, when it happened, um, who was on the ice, the XY coordinates of each of those, both in terms of like physical distance and also fixed towards like who the like defending or offensive, and shot distance and shot angle. Now I had to go back and I had to recreate it from because I've got the XY coordinates for the blocked shots, but it didn't actually record that. But that's not super hard to find. Um, yeah, and so these are in in absolute degrees from dead on. So it's either so from this, I don't know, just 56 degrees. I don't know if it was 56 to the left or 56 to the right. I
Mm,
could figure that out from the X and Y
hmm.
if I wanted to look at does the like does the left lane do better than the right lane?
Hmm. Interesting.
Um, but yeah,
Okay,
really,
thanks for
really
that.
detailed.
In your models, and this might be a statistically very stupid question, but you don't normally have interaction terms. Is there a reason for that?
Um, Mostly because I'm trying to limit complexity. But certainly I can consider ones with interaction terms, and I could consider more. There's tons and tons of different models I could consider um, if I wanted to do, say, like regression trees on a lot of this stuff. That might also be useful. Mostly because I was trying this in this particular time, I was trying to do something um, that was interpretable,
I'd say. So
and
yeah,
with
like I
interactions that gets
guess,
complicated.
is there any way, you think about what goalies, what really, I mean, there's a variety of, I'm just thinking, so for example, if they're in a goalie stance, that's a lot
Mhm.
of work for the legs. If,
Yeah.
and you can see them, in play, like when the puck's in, it's not in a dangerous setting, the goalie stands up like almost immediately. And then,
Hmm.
once there's a threat emerging, then they crouch. There's also like dynamic acrobatic saves that, when they have
Hmm.
to cross the crease, right? And so like,
Hmm.
you get these cross crease passes or cross ice passes leading to a one-timer. Like that
Yeah.
would be a very, that's something you could see. If you had to do a lot of those in a game, you would definitely be getting fatigued. Is there a way with
Hmm.
that existing data to like understand, I guess the amount the goalie might have to move in order to make it?
Um, I would love to find out. So, but the issue there is I would need some tracking data like what Sportlogic has,
Yeah.
um, because they have every pass. So they have multiple events per second, I would say, whereas the stuff you can get from NHL.com is like one event every 5 seconds,
Mm,
and it's typically not enough. Like I could see how much a goalie is moving in those 5 seconds, but that doesn't tell me much.
yeah. I mean, the other thing I thought of was like, just general pace of play, and
Hmm.
whether that can figure in. Is that something you've considered or?
It is something I've considered, largely with zone entries, how frequent they are. Um, I am currently struggling with the all three zones data right now because NHL.com does not include zone entries. Merging the two has been pretty onerous.
Mm,
But yeah, that is definitely because like I think I even list that in like doesn't factor in other sources of workload, like zone entries would definitely be.
hmm. And then like there's the obvious confound too of fatigue of the players, the skaters,
Hmm.
right? So,
Yes.
is there a way to, well, again, I guess like if there's a generalized pace of play, you have a comparison of rates, I suppose, of,
Mhm.
goalie decline versus player decline, as reflected by pace of play, perhaps.
Yeah, so you could do something like that. Um, I think shot quality gets at a lot of that, but what you could do if you had more data is look at like speed of skating approach. Um, yeah, so you like with passes and stuff, you can see how quickly the puck is moving across the ice,
Mm,
and that might be a good proxy for pace of play. Um, Tim Schwartz and I, long ago, looked at, and with Rajitha, I think, we looked at whether or not something is stretched, like the pace is stretched, because in football, in soccer, um, it does matter quite a bit, but we weren't able to find the same effect in hockey.
sorry, you said the pace is stretched.
Yeah, yeah.
What does that mean?
Um, I think that means that as people get more fatigued, they're more likely to make more mistakes and or more defensive mistakes. So what we typically see now, now I'm now talking without preparation,
That's
but
fair.
in the last one third of football games, in soccer games, that's when more goal scoring happens, if I'm not mistaken. And um, the idea of being stretched is like being used, having used up your resources
I
when
see.
you um, and we were trying to find if the same thing happened in hockey, and we weren't really able to. We didn't get a positive result, if I
Yeah.
recall correctly.
Yeah, I think that would be challenging to get.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I guess like Tom has a question. So Tom, go ahead,
Oh,
please.
Yeah, I can give you a break for a moment, Dave, and let you figure out your next question because you know a lot more about hockey than I do.
Hmm.
So first of all, thank you, Jack. I enjoyed your sort of tour of different hockey questions or different goalie questions. I don't know if the data would be available for you to figure this sort of a thing out, but are there, as there are with many other sports, are there different types of goalies? Goalies who are good at one thing, goalies who are good at another thing. I have to imagine there are goalies who are better with
hmm
their glove, goalies who are better with their blocker, goalies who are better with their stick, goalies who are better at moving, goalies that are better at high shots, low shots, all of this
hmm
stuff. Does data exist to figure this out? And then if you can figure that out, one might imagine it might be useful to have two different types of goalies on your team so that you can impose that into your probability equation for which goalie is going to start. You know that you're facing a team that does a lot of high shooting. You want to have your big chested goalie in there.
I see what you mean. Yeah. I mean, you could use that as a proxy for, or you could use opposing team as a proxy for that, which would be the most strategic thing that, oh, I'm going to start, I'm always going to start Thatcher Demko against Seattle. Um, and I imagine, like, because I know in baseball they've got like the heat maps of like who is good at what pitching, but they can switch pitchers a lot more easily.
Mm.
Um, so I think the only thing you would be able to do for that is probably like a likelihood ratio test where you see if I include the variable of opposing team, can like does is that enough to show um yeah, is that enough to show like an improvement in the model? The other thing is if you could simplify teams down to if you could simplify teams down to different styles, like, oh, I have a high shooting style team. Because I think doing it anything more like looking at the player level, I think it would just be too many. I think you'd run out of degrees of freedom pretty quickly that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I guess the trick if you're going to try to do something like that, you might need more detailed data than what is available to try to sort
Mhm.
of cluster goalies into types and
Yeah,
then and
like
then and then try to understand the cluster teams into types and then try to figure out whether there is an advantage to trying to build up a sort of a matchup.
mhm. Um, I would imagine that the teams themselves have that data, but they're
Mm,
not going to share it.
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Because that's exactly what they would want.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, right now, what it seems like is um, if you're on the road in the second game of a back-to-back, you're starting your backup.
Basically, yeah.
Period. That's
Yeah.
it. I mean, you can if instead of all the modeling you did, you just applied that rule, you'd probably have pretty decent sensitivity, maybe not excellent specificity, but probably pretty decent sensitivity for saying yes, under those circumstances, yes, very frequently you are starting the backup. There are probably other circumstances where the backup starts, but that's so that right there, that's a little bit of a three-way interaction for you to have to throw into your model. But
Mhm.
we're allowed to use knowledge to build models.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you're kind of supposed to. Keep forgetting how to raise my
Yeah.
hand.
I've
Okay,
got to
there we
get going, Jack. We have a seminar here. Thanks very much. I won't be
Oh,
around
okay,
to
cool.
talk to you later on, but thanks very much for your talk.
All right, thanks,
Okay,
Tom.
thank
See ya.
you.
Hi, Dan.
Hey,
Please go ahead.
yeah, if there's time for one more.
Oh yeah.
Jack, thanks so much for your talk. From a washed up hockey goalie myself, fatigue is affecting me more and more as I age. So, definitely something I'm interested in. But the question I had was, do you believe that like the next steps for these types of models and algorithms is working in some type of wearable? Like what I went to right away was, what are the up downs? What are the penalty kills that these goalies are having to kind of
Oh,
go through? Similar to what Dave was talking about before, like the amount of movement required to then make the save or even react to a potential shot. Like the fatigue of having a cross ice pass, constantly in and around your net, even battling through traffic and things like that, I know can
mhm,
wear on a goalie.
mhm,
So
mhm.
just wondering like what your thoughts are as far as the next steps in this field and how do you think it would integrate with some of the data that we currently have?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, having a wearable, that's more Dave's field, isn't it? Kinesiology.
Yeah, well,
Um,
it's a great question. I mean, yeah, having an accelerometers on goalies would be phenomenal. I think that like I've always thought about video, and I was gonna actually gonna ask, or that would be my next. That was going to be my next question, but yeah, that's really interesting, and I don't know of any research where that's done, but I'm gonna look it up.
for video, I mean, like Tim Brecht is doing a lot of like video is opening up. I haven't really looked at it, but like or computer vision is
Yeah.
becoming a lot more open source. As for wearables, I thought you meant something um, like a heart rate monitor to determine um, like trimps. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, you could in theory do that. I'm not sure. Like heart rate's not a great measure generally for like very intense short burst efforts. But
Okay, makes
it's
sense.
easily it would be easy to do. In fact, maybe I'm going to throw mine on my son in his next practice and see what happens. Um, but yeah, I think the accelerometer that would really get because like the movements are so short, and like a lot of the player tracking devices are more like they're geographical, right? And the goalies moving in a very small area, and it's the up downs, like Dan had mentioned, and even if you could put accelerometers on different on each limb as well, right? So you have it like kind of close to the center of mass,
Mhm.
but also like you could have it, yeah, you could have it like basically in the at the ex on the extent on the distal ends of each limb.
Having
And,
said all of
yeah,
that, there's a lot of work happening about basically like modeling goalies and players as 3D stick figures
Yeah.
in a
Yeah, yeah,
digitized
the
environment.
that's right. I know I remember yeah, one of the Sport Logique people gave an examples of that. And yes, there's a lot of what they call markerless motion capture in the biomechanics field,
Mhm.
which may be applicable to goalies in, if you can, because you can set up video systems to really focus on that area of the net. So that might be interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, Dan, do you have any other comments or questions?
No, I just like I completely agree. Like I actually I've been playing around with putting. I put two IMUs on each foot and then one on my center of mass and went and played, but I'm not quite at the level anymore where it would really matter. Just kind of looks bad, probably.
Well, have
But
you looked at the data?
IMU?
a little bit, a little bit. I forget where I put it now. I did it earlier last year, but the idea that I had for it is that I was going to build some type of neural network or something to try to identify different movements was kind of my idea.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I was kind of playing around with that to see like how often I do certain things in gameplay, but I would need to validate it against video. And
yeah,
it was
yeah.
one of those things where I really liked the idea for about a week, and then I got dragged onto some other things. But
Well, I like
yeah,
that idea. I'm gonna let's talk afterwards. I think that's
yeah,
good. Um,
yeah. No, let's do it.
okay. Thanks for chiming in. So yeah,
Mhm.
like okay, well, so just to kind of continue on this theme, and Jack, this may be getting very much out of your scope, but again, when I watch my son, play, like sometimes I take video from behind the net, but we don't, and nowadays, even for youth sports, most teams will have a camera system that can track play. So they're like affordable, commercially available devices that are usually set up in the middle at the center line of the ice, and they just they track the play back and forth. So like the resolution is terrible, but you could imagine setting up a camera system, for the goalies specifically, because like what I think about, I mean, goalies, it's a probability, right? It's a you're trying to just reduce the probability of this projectile going in the net, and it's based on anticipation. You can't react fast enough generally to
Mhm.
stop the puck, so you have to anticipate or be positional, and basically orient your limbs in a way that best covers the area of the net. And so I've always kind of like wondered if there's ways to quantify that, and like do certain goalies do that better. I think that this is, yeah, getting out of not necessarily, sort of more the sports analytics realm into the sports science realm, but that's what, to me, I really love to, yeah, try and do like, or I'd really love to see something like that. I don't know if I'm not really the person to do that. I'm not, that's some serious engineering, computer vision and all that stuff. But yeah, like just having, from the angle of the puck, you're like quantifying the area of the net that's available, and how fast the goalie can adjust and cover that area of the net. Yeah,
Let me put you in contact with Tim Brecht.
sure.
So he recently did something at the Linköping hockey conference that was basically that. So
Oh yeah.
he used computer vision and he found like the cross section of available net
Okay.
and um, did some really cool stuff with like yeah, basically looking at shot quality that way.
Well, I would love an introduction.
Okay, cool. I
Okay.
can
Well,
certainly.
I think, Jack, we've taken lots of your time, and I really appreciate your talk, and then the questions after, and Dan for stimulating some, and others for
Hmm, hmm.
stimulating some really good discussion. Uh, so yeah, this has been really great for me, and good learning opportunity. And thanks, Jack, and great job over at Waterloo. And I know you guys over there are doing a fantastic job with all the students and everything with the UAGs. And Southern Ontario seems to
Yeah,
be really an exciting place to be for sports analytics. So yeah,
it's
that's
kind of taken
exciting.
off. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We'll have to keep in touch because I think there'll be some big collaboration opportunities
yeah.
in which I can't make any guarantees about yet, so I won't say anything
No,
beyond
well,
that.
that's
That's
totally
okay.
fine. I
Yeah.
understand that there's a lot of constraints, but yeah, lacrosse is the other sport we've talked about, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well.
Yeah. The
Okay.
only thing I've done with lacrosse is like in-game prediction, but yeah, I would love to come back to it because like it's a higher scoring hockey to me, and that
Oh yeah.
is just very
Well,
cool.
it's a very, very different game though, right? Like in both field and box, like they're such,
Mhm.
but it's a wonderful sport. Like I can't believe it's not more popular. Okay.
It's getting there. It's getting there.
Yeah, it is. It's true. Okay, guys. Well, thanks everyone for your attending. And Jack, thanks again for your talk. And we'll see you the next time.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care, everyone.